The stars above Zelani Prime burned with an unnatural red glow. Ambassador Kithvara stood at the observation deck of the failing orbital station, watching her world die below. The beautiful blue oceans that had once covered 60% of her planet were now dark pools of writhing organic mass. Silver cities, once symbols of Zelani achievement, were being consumed by creatures that defied every law of nature she knew. The Void Swarm had come 3 months ago, at first thought to be a pirate invasion. The Zelani military, though small, had always been enough to handle skirmishes with pirates or the occasional border dispute. But these creatures were different. They didn't want territory or resources. They wanted everything, every living thing, every plant, every microbe. They consumed it all and turned it into more of themselves. Zelani Prime was becoming a breeding ground for horrors beyond imagination. Kithvara's hands trembled as she activated the communication array once more. She had sent dozens of messages across known space, begging for help from anyone who would listen. The responses had been predictable and devastating. The Altarian Republic expressed their sympathies. The Centauri Trade Federation offered to buy artifacts from the planet before it fell completely. The Draconian Empire, with its massive fleet, declared the situation hopeless. She was about to send her final message. The station's power grid was failing, and the swarm's biomechanical tendrils were reaching into the lower levels. Soon, even this final sanctuary would be consumed. Her voice trembled, but she spoke clearly into the transmitter. To all those who hear this, the Zelani are dying. Our children are being taken and converted into nightmare creatures. Our world is being stripped bare and turned into a breeding ground for horrors. We have days, maybe hours, before we fall completely. Anyone who has the power to help, please, we beg of you. The explosions shook the station as bioships rose from the surface below, their organic hulls pulsing with alien life. They had found her location. She had minutes, maybe less. As New Horizon plunged deeper into Zelani space, the gravity of the situation became increasingly apparent. The system, once vibrant with the life of several thriving planets, was now a dark and lifeless expanse. The planets that had once thrived under the nurturing glow of their star had been ravaged, their surfaces now covered with strange, biomechanical tendrils that pulsed with grotesque, alien energy. These weren't just the usual remnants of a war. They were the marks of something that had consumed, adapted, and annihilated. Inside the command deck of New Horizon, Captain Jake Morrison stood with his arms crossed, staring at the swirling chaos outside the viewing port. His mind raced as he processed the tactical data from the galactic network. The transmission they had received from High Counselor VTH Kaller was the final plea of a species on the brink of extinction. If they didn't act now, Zelani Prime would be lost forever, just like the other colonies. Morrison had been a soldier for many years. He had fought in countless battles against pirates, rebels, and even once in the Martian colonial rebellion. But this felt different. This wasn't just a military mission, it was the fight for a species' survival. The Zelani were peaceful, elegant beings. They had no concept of war in the same way humanity did. And yet here they were, fighting to hold on to the last scraps of their civilization, desperate for help. Captain, Lieutenant Collins's voice snapped Morrison from his thoughts. I've decrypted another transmission from Zelani 4. It's faint, but it's them. Morrison's gaze fixed on the communication panel. The voice that came through was strained, barely audible over the crackling static. This is High Counselor VTH Kaller, she said, the words clear but fragile. The swarm has overwhelmed our outer defenses. We are trapped within the last bastion of our capital. The enemy is relentless. We cannot withstand much longer. Please, we beg, send help. Our people, our children are. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the chilling silence of impending doom. Morrison gripped the edge of the console. He was no stranger to combat, but the thought of entire civilizations being wiped out with no help coming stirred something deep in him. He had learned long ago that war wasn't just about tactics or firepower, it was about people, families, lives. And right now, the Zelani needed him. They needed humanity. Get Earth Command on the line, Morrison ordered, his voice tight with resolve. We need reinforcements. The response from Earth Command. The transmission from New Horizon reached Earth Command faster than anticipated, thanks to the quantum communication network that connected the farthest reaches of human space. Within moments, Admiral Lisa Carter's face appeared on Morrison's secure screen. The look on her face was one of grim determination. Captain Morrison, she said without preamble, I've reviewed the data. The Void Swarm is a nightmare unlike anything we've faced before. It's a self-replicating biological force capable of overwhelming entire worlds. The Zelani. They are on the brink, but we're not turning our backs on them. Morrison felt a small, fleeting sense of relief. Carter wasn't one to make empty promises. If anyone could rally the forces to help, it would be her. The Third Fleet is being mobilized, Carter continued, her tone firm and unwavering. Commodore Mitchell will command it, but New Horizon will be the spearhead. You're closest to the Zelani now, so we're relying on you to make contact, assess the situation, and provide intel. Time is critical. Mitchell's fleet will take a few days to arrive, but we can't let Zelani 4 fall before then. Morrison nodded, acknowledging the orders. He knew what had to be done. It was time for humanity, Deathworlder reputation to mean something. He wasn't just going to show up and hope things worked out. He would take the fight to the Void Swarm. "We'll do everything we can, Admiral," Morrison replied, his voice steady but his heart pounding in his chest. "The Zelani won't be alone. We'll fight for them." "Good luck, Captain. Earth is counting on you," Carter said before the screen flickered off, leaving Morrison alone with the weight of the mission. Preparing for the worst. The ship's engines hummed quietly as New Horizon altered its course toward Zelani 4. Morrison turned to Lieutenant Collins, his mind already planning their next steps. "Collins, I want you to clean up any communications we can find from the surface. The more intel we have, the better. We're going to need to get eyes on the ground and fast." "Aye, Captain," Collins replied, already at work. He adjusted his station, his fingers dancing over the controls as the comms system worked to clear up the damaged transmissions. Morrison's eyes scanned the data, noting the unsettling patterns of destruction that were spreading across Zelani space. In the midst of it all, something gnawed at him. This wasn't just a typical invasion. The Void Swarm didn't take prisoners. They didn't leave survivors. "Captain, we've got another transmission from Zelani 4. Collins called out from his console, his voice suddenly tense. Morrison hurried over. This time the transmission came through clearer than before, although the voice still sounded faint. "This is High Counselor Kaller," she said, her voice trembling with the weight of desperation. "We've sealed ourselves inside the last remaining stronghold, the Swarm. It is growing faster than we expected. We need weapons, any force you can send, we can use." Morrison's jaw tightened. The situation was more dire than he had imagined. The Zelani had no military force left. Their last hope was New Horizon, a ship designed for reconnaissance, not ground combat. But he knew what they were facing, and he had a plan. "We'll give them everything we've got," Morrison muttered, more to himself than anyone else. He turned back to his crew. "Prepare for a surface landing. We're going to make sure they don't face this alone." The time for hesitation was over. They were humanity's last hope for Zelani Prime, and they would not fail. The New Horizon streaked through the black void of space, pushing its engines to the limit as it headed for Zelani 4. The eerie silence of the desolate system weighed heavily on Captain Morrison. The once vibrant world was now a shadow of itself, with ominous dark tendrils creeping across its surface. The Zelani had never known war on this scale. Their world had been peaceful, a haven of art, music, and innovation. Now it was being torn apart by a relentless, merciless force. Morrison stood on the bridge, eyes scanning the tactical readouts. The data was grim. The Void Swarm wasn't just a typical invasion force. It was a biological nightmare, an all-consuming entity that could adapt and replicate faster than anything they had faced. The Swarm's presence on Zelani Prime was proof enough. It had converted entire ecosystems, twisted them into grotesque, biomechanical horrors. The once thriving cities and ecosystems had been reshaped into a massive breeding ground for the Swarm. "We're approaching Zelani 4, Collins announced, pulling Morrison from his thoughts. "Sensors show heavy interference, but there's still a faint signal coming from the surface. It's definitely coming from the last remaining Zelani stronghold." Morrison nodded grimly. He had seen destruction before, during the Martian colonial rebellion in the asteroid belt wars and countless other skirmishes, but nothing like this. The Zelani weren't warriors. They were thinkers, philosophers, and creators. But now they were facing an enemy that saw everything, even their very existence, as fuel for its endless expansion. "Open a comm channel to the surface," Morrison ordered. The transmission was weak, but the voice of High Counselor VTH Kaller came through clearly, though strained. "Captain Morrison, we are barely holding the line. The Swarm has breached our outer defenses. We are trapped within the final stronghold of our capital city. The children..." They are already converting some of our people. Please help us. We are all but out of time. Caller's voice trembled with the weight of her words. Morrison's heart ached for her people, but he couldn't afford to dwell on the emotion. They were running out of time. The fleet might be days away, but right now, it was just New Horizon against the Void Swarm. "We're coming down, Counselor," Morrison replied, his voice filled with determination. "You won't be alone." As the ship descended toward the surface of Zelani 4, Morrison's mind raced. He had already mapped out the plan for the mission. New Horizon would be able to provide the initial support, scanning for enemy positions, assisting with reconnaissance, and perhaps, if they were lucky, providing a small strike force. But that would only buy the Zelani time. The real battle would come when the Third Fleet arrived. New Horizon entered the atmosphere, and Morrison could see the devastation firsthand. The once beautiful cities now lay in ruins, their streets choked with the remnants of the Void Swarm's wake. Massive organic tendrils had wrapped around the buildings like constricting vines, pulsing with a sickly light. Bio-ships, massive, living vessels, hovered above the surface, harvesting what remained of the planet's resources. "We're almost there, Captain," Collins said, his voice tight with anxiety. Morrison's eyes fixed on the planet below. They were coming in hot, and it wouldn't be long before the swarm's attention shifted to them. He had no illusions about what they were up against. The swarm would tear through their defenses if they didn't act fast. "Prepare for ground deployment," Morrison ordered. "We're landing as close to the stronghold as we can. Collins, keep scanning for any signs of enemy forces, especially bio-ships. If they're still up there, they'll be looking for us." Collins nodded, his fingers flying across the controls. "Aye, Captain, all systems are operational. The bio-ships are concentrated over the eastern sector, but there are still pockets of resistance within the stronghold." Morrison's stomach tightened. It would be a fight from the moment they set foot on the ground. But that was the only way forward. They couldn't let the Zelani fall, not when humanity had the strength to stop it. The New Horizon hit the ground with a thud, shaking the entire ship. The landing zone was quiet, eerily so. The once thriving city had been reduced to a skeletal ruin, and the landscape was covered with massive biomechanical growths. Tendrils stretched toward the sky, their twisted forms reminiscent of the planet's final struggle. "Lock down all external hatches," Morrison ordered. "We're moving out fast." Lieutenant Collins and the rest of the crew scrambled to prepare the ship's landing party for their deployment. Morrison's eyes swept across the bridge, meeting the gaze of each of his crew members. They were all in this together, and he trusted each one of them with his life. As the landing doors opened, a wave of stench hit them, foul, metallic, and decayed. The air felt thick, suffocating. Morrison's helmet hissed as it sealed, his breathing echoing inside the suit. They stepped onto the cracked ground, and Morrison's boots made a sickening squelch as they sank slightly into the soft, organic surface. "We're going to be on high alert," Morrison said. "We'll head for the central command post. Stick together. I don't need to remind anyone what we're up against. This is a rescue mission. Let's do our part to give these people a fighting chance." The team advanced through the ruins, moving cautiously. It felt like walking through the bones of a once great civilization. The alien structures that had once been so beautiful were now twisted into grotesque living forms, pulsating with a dark energy. Ahead, the remnants of Zelani defenders could be seen in the distance. A few brave souls stood, weapons raised, holding off the swarm's constant onslaught. But their numbers were dwindling and the swarm was closing in. Morrison raised his hand, signaling his team to stop. Ahead, a bio-ship hovered menacingly over the horizon, its massive organic hull flickering with unnatural life. The ship's tendrils reached down to the surface, absorbing what little remained of the Zelani infrastructure. "We've got incoming," one of the Marines muttered, eyes scanning the horizon. The squad advanced carefully, using the rubble of destroyed buildings for cover. As they neared the center of the city, Morrison saw the flicker of light from the central stronghold. They were getting closer to the heart of the Zelani's last stand. But then the ground trembled beneath their feet. The deep, bone-rattling sound of something massive was approaching. Morrison's eyes widened. The swarm wasn't just attacking, it was advancing, learning, adapting. A massive shadow appeared overhead, something far larger than any bio-ship they had seen before. It was moving toward them, a nightmare of claws and spiked tendrils, and it was coming straight for them. The Void Swarm had just evolved into something far worse. The massive shadow loomed over the ruins of the Zelani capital, a dark, grotesque shape that seemed to swallow the very light around it. It was a bioship unlike any Morrison had ever seen. Larger, more terrifying, its form a perfect blend of organic tissue and sharp, jagged armor that pulsed with malevolent energy. The sky seemed to darken as it neared, the air thick with the promise of destruction. Morrison's heart raced as he watched the creature descend, its tendrils reaching out like hungry fingers, scraping the surface of the planet. It was a living weapon, and it was heading straight for them. "Move," Morrison barked, pushing his team into motion. "Get to cover, stay low, stay sharp. They've sent out the big guns." The squad scattered, taking shelter behind the crumbling remains of what had once been the central square. Morrison's breath was steady, but inside, his mind was running through scenarios at lightning speed. They couldn't let this creature close the distance. If it reached them, they'd be obliterated in seconds. They needed to fight back, and they needed to do it fast. "Collins, how long until those reinforcements arrive?" Morrison called into his comms. He knew the answer, but he needed to hear it. Time was running out. "Fleet's still 2 days out," Collins replied, his voice tense. "We're on our own for now, Captain." Morrison cursed under his breath. The New Horizon was equipped with powerful weapons, but the creature above them was far too powerful to take on alone. They would need to strike hard and fast, using every trick at their disposal. "Sergeant Martinez, get your team ready for a counterattack," Morrison ordered. "We've got one shot at this." Martinez, a battle-hardened veteran with eyes that had seen the worst of humanity's wars, nodded sharply. He turned to his squad, issuing commands in quick, practiced bursts. "Everyone on me," Martinez shouted. "We're hitting it hard, use everything. Flamers, grenades, plasma. If it's alive, we'll make sure it dies." Morrison gritted his teeth. He had no choice. The Zelani stronghold was just a few hundred meters away, and they couldn't afford to let the swarm's bioship get any closer. They had to neutralize this threat now. The squad advanced in a well-coordinated spread, staying low, using the wreckage for cover. Morrison moved with them, his pulse steady as he tracked the bioship's movement. The ship had already begun its descent, its tendrils whipping through the air like massive whips, slamming into the ground with deafening force. Morrison's fingers tightened around his weapon, a sleek energy rifle designed to pierce the toughest armor. He aimed carefully, watching the ship's weak spots as it moved, knowing they had only seconds before it would drop to the ground and start attacking. "Now," Morrison shouted, and the squad opened fire in unison. Energy bolts, plasma shots, and grenades shot through the air, striking the bioship with brilliant bursts of light. The creature's armored surface sparked, sending shudders through its massive form. But it didn't stop. Instead, it adapted. The tendrils whirled and snapped, slapping against the ground and crushing anything in their path. The bioship released a high-pitched screeching sound, an unholy wail that echoed across the dead city. Morrison's stomach churned. They were barely making a dent in the creature's massive frame. It wasn't enough. "Focus fire on the tendrils," Morrison ordered, his mind racing. They needed to disable the creature's movement. If they could stop it from advancing, maybe they could buy the Zelani some time. The squad shifted their aim, targeting the tendrils with precise shots. They fired explosive rounds, attempting to pierce the armored exoskeletons that protected the ship's limbs. The creature writhed, screeching in pain as the tendrils began to lose their mobility. One by one, they dropped, their movements slowing as the damage piled up. But it wasn't enough. "Watch out," Collins's voice crackled over the comms. "It's adapting again." The bioship's surface rippled, its armor shifting and reforming. New tendrils shot out, harder and thicker, regenerating at a frightening pace. It was learning from the attack, evolving right before their eyes. Morrison swore under his breath. "Get back, fall back," Morrison shouted. "We can't take this thing head-on." The squad sprinted back toward the ruins of a nearby building, using its remains as a temporary barricade. But the bioship wasn't stopping. Its tendrils slammed into the ground with a force that sent debris flying through the air. "We need to get to that stronghold," Morrison shouted. "It's our only chance." But the swarm wasn't going to let them reach it. The air was thick with the buzzing of smaller bioships, each one scouting for survivors, and their relentless onslaught kept the team from advancing. Just as Morrison thought the situation couldn't get any worse, something unexpected happened. A deep, rumbling noise shook the ground beneath them. The Zelani stronghold, A once-proud citadel of towering spires and crystalline structures began to pulse with a sudden, fierce energy. From the core of the building, a blinding light shot into the sky, disorienting the swarm's bioships and sending them into a frenzy. "What the hell is that?" Sergeant Martinez shouted, his eyes wide with surprise. "The Zelani, they've activated their last defense," Collins said, awe in his voice. "They've got something, some kind of weapon." The bioship above them screeched in anger, its massive form twisting in the air as it attempted to avoid the energy surge from the stronghold. But it wasn't fast enough. The beam from the Citadel's core struck the bioship, and for a moment everything went silent. The ship's surface crackled and burned, the light tearing through its defenses. But it wasn't enough to destroy it. Instead, the creature released a final, deafening roar, its tendrils flailing wildly as it fought to maintain control. "We've got one chance," Morrison muttered, watching the bioship's energy flicker and fade. "We hit it with everything we've got." Martinez nodded. "Ready, Captain." The squad opened fire again, pouring all their remaining firepower into the creature. This time, it was different. The Zelani stronghold's energy beam had weakened it, leaving it vulnerable to their attack. Morrison's rifle hummed with power as he fired directly into the heart of the bioship's exposed core. With a final, gut-wrenching screech, the creature exploded, sending a shockwave through the ground and knocking the team off their feet. For a moment, everything went dark. When Morrison regained his senses, he blinked through the haze of dust and debris. The bioship was gone, but the fight wasn't over yet. They had won one battle, but the war was far from done. "Report," Morrison shouted, his voice hoarse. Martinez was the first to stand, brushing the dirt off his suit. "We're good, Captain, but we're far from safe. The swarm will be back, and next time they'll bring more." Morrison looked toward the Zelani stronghold, now lit up with a faint glow of energy. The defense had bought them time, but it was just that, time. "We hold here," Morrison said, his voice steady. "We fight until the fleet arrives, and we don't stop until this planet is free." The blast from the bioship's destruction had created a temporary silence, a lull in the chaos that hung in the air like an impending storm. The ground trembled beneath Morrison's boots as the remnants of the creature's carcass burned in the distance, blackened smoke rising from its destroyed form. But this victory, however hard-won, was just a brief respite. The swarm was far from finished, and they had only begun to understand the sheer scale of what they were up against. Morrison stood tall, his breath steady but his mind racing. The New Horizon had done what it could, but they couldn't afford to stay on the defensive for much longer. Not while the swarm still controlled the skies and the ground was teeming with their relentless, shape-shifting forces. He turned toward his team, all of whom were already regrouping. Sergeant Martinez's squad was checking their weapons, ensuring that nothing had malfunctioned during the brutal firefight. Lieutenant Collins was typing furiously on the comms panel, his face etched with concern. "Captain," Collins called out, his voice tight. "I've been getting scattered signals from the fleet. They're still on course, but it looks like the swarm's deploying more bioships. The swarm has regrouped faster than we expected. They're adapting." Morrison cursed under his breath. That was to be expected. The Void Swarm wasn't a typical enemy. It learned and evolved from every attack. What they had just faced was only a small fraction of what was out there. "We need to move now," Morrison said, turning to the others. "The Zelani stronghold can hold for a little longer with the energy weapon they've activated, but we're not getting another shot like this. We can't afford to wait for the fleet to arrive. It's up to us to get to the heart of their defenses." Racing against time, the Zelani stronghold was located deep within the capital city, hidden beneath layers of crumbling buildings, and fortified by a mix of energy shields and ancient technology. The swarm, however, had already adapted, sending smaller scout ships to probe the outer defenses, looking for any weak points. Morrison motioned to Martinez, signaling for his squad to move. The team sprinted through the wreckage of the city, dodging falling debris and keeping to the shadows. Every step they took felt like they were walking on the edge of a razor blade. One wrong move and the swarm would be upon them. The streets, once lined with elegant buildings and lush parks, were now a twisted maze of alien growths and mechanical monstrosities. The swarm had taken the city and turned it into a breeding ground, each building and piece of infrastructure now part of their ever-expanding hive. Morrison's boots crunched on the organic floor as he looked around, taking in the devastation. "Stay sharp," he muttered under his breath. We're going to need all the luck we can get. They reached the heart of the stronghold, an enormous crystalline structure that pulsed with a strange, ethereal energy. This was it. The Zelani had activated their last-ditch defense, a weapon powerful enough to slow the Void Swarm's advance. But they couldn't rely on it for long. As effective as it was, the swarm would adapt to it, just as they had adapted to every other form of resistance. "Captain," Collins said from behind him, urgency in his voice. "I've got new data. The swarm's sending more ships down to the surface. We don't have much time before they overwhelm the stronghold." "We'll make our stand here," Morrison replied, his voice determined. "Hold the line. We keep them from getting to the core of the stronghold." The swarm strikes back. No sooner had they entered the heart of the stronghold than the ground shook again, this time more violently. The sound of incoming swarm ships was unmistakable. Tiny bio-drones swarmed overhead, scanning for any survivors. They were small, fast, and relentless, but it was the larger ships that Morrison feared. "Brace yourselves," Morrison shouted, as massive tendrils burst through the ground around them. The swarm was closing in from every direction. Martinez and his squad quickly took defensive positions, laying down suppressive fire as the bio-drones circled above them. The rest of the team moved toward the heart of the stronghold, where the Zelani energy weapon was housed, a massive device that pulsed with power. They could feel the energy in the air, almost like static, as the weapon powered up. Morrison's hand tightened around his weapon as he turned toward his team. "We hold them here. We protect the energy core. This is the Zelani's last chance." With his order, they opened fire again, targeting the bio-drones and larger bioships that were moving toward them. The plasma blasts lit up the night, cutting through the creatures with explosive force. But the swarm was too numerous. They didn't stop. They kept coming, relentless, overwhelming. The air grew thick with the sound of the battle. The fire from their weapons couldn't hold back the tide of alien forces. The sky was filled with the shrill cries of the swarm's bio-ships, and the ground quaked beneath them as more tendrils erupted from the earth. "Collins, how much longer?" Morrison asked, gritting his teeth as he fired his weapon. "Energy core is stabilizing, almost there," Collins replied, his voice urgent. "We just need another few minutes." The strain of the battle was evident on everyone's faces. Sweat dripped from Morrison's brow as he fired again, watching as the swarm drones fell before them. But more were coming. They would have to hold the line at all costs. A bitter sacrifice. Then, without warning, a loud crash rang out, followed by a horrific screech. One of the larger bioships had landed right in their midst, its tendrils thrashing wildly as it tore into the ground. The impact was violent, sending debris flying and knocking everyone off their feet. "Get up," Morrison shouted, scrambling to his feet as he checked his surroundings. The bioship loomed over them like a nightmare, its tendrils lashing out. Martinez's squad was already engaging the creature, but it was clear that they were outmatched. The massive bioship wasn't just a threat. They were facing an enemy that was far stronger than anything they had fought so far. "Colonel," Morrison shouted over the noise, "we need to disable that thing." Rodriguez, the Marine leader, nodded grimly. "Martinez, get the charges ready. We're going in." The squad advanced once again, this time with explosives, moving with deadly precision toward the bioship. Every second counted. They had to disable the creature's core systems before it could break through to the heart of the stronghold. "Hold them off," Morrison ordered. "Make sure we get to the core." With the energy weapon's pulse growing louder and more intense, the team worked quickly. As Martinez's squad set the charges, the bioship lunged forward, unleashing a final, deafening screech. A spray of organic acid shot from its body, but the squad had already made their move. The explosion was deafening, sending shockwaves through the area. The bioship buckled and writhed before finally exploding in a shower of burning fragments. The swarm was thrown back, but the fight was far from over. "We've got them on the ropes," Rodriguez shouted. "Keep pushing." Morrison looked to the horizon, where more ships were descending. The swarm wasn't done yet, but neither were they. The ground was shaking, the air thick with the acrid smell of burning bioship remains. The immediate blast from the destroyed swarm vessel had sent shockwaves through the battlefield, knocking out a dozen smaller drones, but the situation remained desperate. The massive explosions only served to send the Void swarm into an even greater frenzy. Now they were relentless, faster, more vicious, and angrier than ever. Morrison stood, his body sore from the impact of the explosion, but his focus was razor-sharp. The core of the stronghold was pulsing with energy. The Zelani had activated their final defense system, but the swarm had adapted quickly. Every wave of their relentless assault seemed to test the Zelani's dwindling resources. The human crew, along with the Zelani survivors, had become the last line of defense. Morrison scanned the battlefield as he caught his breath. The once pristine cityscape was now a labyrinth of ruins. The only thing that kept them alive was the energy weapon at the heart of the stronghold, and the hope that the approaching human fleet would arrive in time. But the fleet wasn't here yet. "Captain, we've got more incoming," Collins reported, his voice frantic as he monitored the tactical readouts. "At least 10 more bioships on final descent. If they land, the energy weapon won't hold them off for long." Morrison's mind raced. He knew that each passing second brought them closer to the end. The swarm was adapting faster than any of them could anticipate. They had to break the cycle, or it would be over. "We've got to disable the swarm's coordination network," Morrison said, his voice determined. "The Zelani weapon is holding them off, but it's only effective as long as they can't figure out how to disrupt it. We need to hit them where it hurts." Rodriguez, who had been coordinating the defense with her Marines, looked over. "Where would that be, Captain?" "The bioships. They're all linked, controlled by a central hive mind. If we can disable that control structure, we could sever the swarm's coordination. It would slow them down long enough for the fleet to arrive and take over." Rodriguez's eyes sharpened. "That's a tall order. Where do we hit them?" "Central node, somewhere deep inside the swarm's landing zone. We need to strike there, take it out completely. The swarm's hive mind is the heart of their operation." Morrison looked at his team, all of them battered but unyielding. He could see the determination in their eyes. The mission was simple: find the core, destroy the central node, and stop the swarm from adapting further. They were going to give the Zelani a fighting chance. The heart of the swarm. The route to the heart of the swarm's landing zone wasn't easy. The swarm had already begun reinforcing its defenses, deploying more bioships that blocked every avenue of approach. The team pushed forward through a city now entirely converted into a living nightmare, each building pulsing with the organic matter that fueled the swarm's relentless expansion. The air smelled thick with the sting of burning fuel, twisted metal, and the ever-present tang of decay. Every step was a fight. Every corner held another skirmish. The squad moved carefully, staying in cover, using every advantage of the shattered city to keep them out of the swarm's line of sight. 10 meters to the core," Martinez said, his voice steady despite the tension. "We're almost there." But then, as if on cue, the ground shook violently. The entire city seemed to shift under their feet, and Morrison's instincts screamed at him. The swarm had figured them out. The larger bioships above had detected their movement, and now they were retaliating. "Take cover," Morrison shouted, diving behind a nearby wrecked column. The sound of massive tendrils slamming into the ground echoed through the streets. The swarm was closing in. Plasma blasts and energy bolts erupted as the team returned fire, their weapons lighting up the darkened ruins. The ground trembled as more and more bioships landed, their organic hulls bristling with weapons. The swarm was no longer just defending, it was going on the offensive. "Collins, any sign of that central node?" Morrison yelled over the chaos. "Just ahead, Captain," Collins called out. "I've isolated the signal. It's coming from beneath that massive building, no more than 50 meters out." Morrison nodded. "Rodriguez, Martinez, push forward. We're almost there." The last assault. They moved swiftly, each member of the team covering the other as they advanced toward the massive building at the center of the swarm's landing zone. It loomed over them, its once beautiful exterior now transformed into something terrifying, an amalgamation of living flesh and mechanical structures. The closer they got, the stronger the sense of foreboding grew. The ground seemed to pulse beneath their feet, and the air felt thick with the swarm's overwhelming presence. It was almost as if the building itself was alive, a part of the hive mind that controlled the entire swarm. Morrison's pulse raced as they neared the entrance to the building. The doorways were sealed with thick, armored organic matter, but their weapons had no trouble cutting through. Martinez was the first to reach the door, his plasma cutter flashing brightly as it sliced through the material. The team entered the building, weapons raised, prepared for whatever lay inside. What they found was worse than they could have imagined. The central node was located deep within the structure, surrounded by hundreds of bio-drones. These were the creatures that controlled the swarm, intelligent, yet utterly devoid of empathy or hesitation. They turned toward the team, their multiple eyes glowing as they prepared to launch their attack. The team opened fire immediately, their shots ripping through the air, hitting the drones with deadly precision. The bio-drones retaliated, charging at them with vicious speed. But the team was ready. Rodriguez's Marines moved like clockwork, their training allowing them to take down drone after drone with ruthless efficiency. As Morrison pushed deeper into the building, he saw the heart of the swarm, a massive, organic core pulsing with sickly energy. It was the source of the hive mind's control. If they could destroy it, the swarm would lose its coordination, and the Zelani might finally have a chance. "Set the charges," Morrison ordered. Martinez and his team moved quickly, planting the explosive charges around the core. The sound of the drones' shrill cries filled the air, but they couldn't stop them. The charges were set. "Charges are primed, Captain," Martinez called out. "We've got 5 minutes until detonation." But just as they were about to leave, the ground shook violently again. A massive tendril broke through the building's ceiling, slamming down with terrifying force. It was the final bioship, an enormous, monstrous creature that had been following them. Morrison's heart raced as he realized the danger they were in. The creature was massive, its tendrils striking with the force of a wrecking ball. They had no choice but to fight it. A desperate gamble. The battle raged around them as the team scrambled to avoid the creature's deadly tendrils. It was bigger, faster, and stronger than anything they had faced. Every strike from its tendrils sent debris flying, shaking the building to its foundation. "We have to hold it off," Morrison shouted as he fired his weapon into the creature's exposed tendrils. The squad fought valiantly, but the creature's power was overwhelming. It slammed into the walls, sending entire sections of the building crumbling. Morrison could hear the charges beeping, counting down their final moments. 3 minutes, Captain," Martinez shouted, his voice strained. "We have to get out now." The team had no choice. They fought back with everything they had, buying time for the charges to detonate. As the last of the bio-drones fell, Morrison grabbed the remote detonator and activated it. The explosion was deafening. The entire building shook, and the heart of the swarm exploded in a burst of light and energy. The central node collapsed, sending waves of energy through the swarm, severing its control. The monstrous bioship screeched in agony as its connection to the hive mind was severed. It staggered and crashed to the ground, its massive form breaking apart. A shattered victory. As the dust settled, Morrison looked around at his team, exhausted but triumphant. The charges had worked. The swarm's control had been shattered. But the fight wasn't over. "We've done our part," Morrison said, his voice heavy with the weight of the battle. "Now we wait for the fleet. We've bought the Zelani some time. Let's make sure we don't waste it." The ground still trembled beneath Morrison's feet as the last of the dust and debris from the explosion settled around him. The vast, once gleaming city was now a sprawling ruin, pocked with craters, broken buildings, and the remnants of the Void Swarm's rampage. Their victory had come at a steep price, but they had bought the Zelani the most precious resource they could ask for: time. Morrison stood amidst the devastation, his chest heaving from exhaustion, his armor scratched and scorched from the battle. He turned his head to see his team, all of them similarly battered but alive. The explosion had severed the core of the swarm's control structure, rendering their hive mind fragmented. But Morrison knew better than to believe that meant the war was over. Rodriguez walked up beside him, her expression set with grim determination. She gave him a quick nod before her eyes scanned the horizon. "Captain," she said quietly, "we've done what we came here to do, but the swarm's never just going to roll over." Morrison nodded. "I know, but the fleet's on its way and we've just slowed them down enough. The swarm won't be able to regroup as quickly. This was a victory, however small it may feel." Behind them, the Zelani survivors slowly began to emerge from the wreckage of their stronghold. Their expressions were a mix of disbelief and cautious hope. Kethvara, the Zelani ambassador, stepped forward, her translucent blue skin dimmed by exhaustion, but her eyes alight with gratitude. "Captain Morrison," she said, her voice heavy with emotion, "you've saved us. We didn't think we had any hope left, but you came, you didn't turn your back on us." Morrison met her gaze, his face unreadable. He couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction at seeing her alive, but he knew the battle was far from over. "You fought alongside us," he said quietly. "You didn't give up either. We couldn't have done it without your courage." Kithvara's eyes softened as she looked toward the remnants of their city. "Our home, so much lost, but we will rebuild. With your help, we will rebuild." As the sounds of distant battle continued to echo through the wreckage, Morrison turned toward his team. "We need to move," he said, his voice low but filled with command. "The fleet will be here soon, but we're not out of danger yet. We need to regroup and fortify our position." He turned to Rodriguez. "Get the Marines organized. I want all survivors accounted for and a perimeter set up. We're not taking any chances." Rodriguez nodded immediately, issuing commands to her Marines, who began moving swiftly to secure the area. Morrison glanced at Collins, who was still monitoring the comms. "Any word from the fleet, Collins?" Morrison asked. Collins was typing furiously, his brow furrowed in concentration. Finally, he looked up. "The fleet's about 12 hours out, Captain, but there's more bad news. There's a fleet of Void swarm ships still holding position near the edge of the system. They haven't given up yet." Morrison's heart sank, but he didn't show it. He had anticipated this. The swarm had proven too adaptable to be defeated with just one strike. "All right," he said, taking a deep breath. "We hold until the fleet arrives. This battle is far from over, but we've got the advantage. We have to make sure the Zelani get through this." A fragile hope. As the hours stretched on, the team worked tirelessly to set up defenses. They reinforced the stronghold's perimeter, laying traps, setting up energy shields, and preparing for another wave of the swarm. Every soldier knew that, despite their victory in the heart of the swarm's territory, the true battle was still ahead of them. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future of the Zelani people. Morrison, however, couldn't shake the feeling that the fleet's arrival might be too late. Every moment, the swarm's forces were regrouping, adapting, and growing stronger. They had gained a temporary advantage, but it would take more than just a few hours of preparation to win this war. "We've got to make every shot count," Morrison muttered to himself as he paced along the barricades. The sound of the ground shaking again reminded him of the relentless onslaught that was about to come. As he rounded a corner, he found Kithvara standing by herself, staring out at the wreckage of her homeworld. She didn't seem to notice him approach until he spoke. "You know," Morrison began quietly, "if anyone had told me a year ago I'd be standing on a planet like this, fighting for a species like the Zelani, I wouldn't have believed them." Kithvara didn't turn to face him, but her voice was calm. "And if I had told you that Deathworlders, humans, would be the ones to save us, I wonder if you would have believed it." Morrison paused. "I would have believed it," he said quietly. "We've fought the worst things the universe has to offer, and we never stop. That's what makes us human." Kithvara finally turned to face him, her eyes full of gratitude and sorrow. "The swarm is coming, but now there's something we didn't have before, hope, and that, Captain, is what makes the difference." Morrison nodded, but his gaze drifted back to the horizon. "Hope's a powerful thing," he said, "but it's going to take more than that to stop the swarm. We need to be ready." Kithvara joined him at the edge of the stronghold, staring out at the vast, desolate landscape. "I know," she said softly, "but this time we're not alone." The final assault. Nightfall came quickly, and the quiet before the storm was almost unbearable. The Zelani survivors had gathered inside the stronghold, securing food, water, and medical supplies, while the Marines prepared for the inevitable final assault. They were fortified, but everyone knew that the real challenge was still to come. The first sign that the fleet wasn't far off was the flash of distant energy signatures. Morrison's eyes narrowed. They were coming in fast, but the swarm was not far behind them. "Everyone get ready," Morrison called, his voice cutting through the tension. The battle about to begin. Rodriguez, Martinez, and the others moved into position, securing their weapons and preparing for what would surely be the final confrontation. The swarm had come in waves before, but this time it would be different. They had a chance now, an opportunity that the Zelani had thought was lost forever. Morrison took a deep breath and checked his gear. He was ready for whatever the swarm threw at them, but as he glanced at his team, he realized something. This wasn't just a military mission anymore. It was a battle for survival, not just for the Zelani, but for the galaxy itself. The swarm's spread had to be stopped here now, or it would be the end of everything. And so, as the ground began to rumble once again, Morrison set his jaw, raised his weapon, and prepared to face the swarm one final time. "Hold the line," he shouted, as the first of the Void's swarm ships descended upon them. The battle raged for hours, the air thick with the roar of weaponry, the ground quaking under the relentless assault of the Void swarm. But with humanity's intervention and the Zelani's unyielding will, they fought back, and for the first time in months they began to push the swarm back. And then in the distance, the human fleet arrived. The swarm's leadership, its coordination, shattered. The Zelani, with the help of the humans, stood victorious. But as the smoke cleared and the last of the bioships fell, Morrison knew this victory was only the beginning. The galaxy had learned a crucial lesson. The Deathworlders were not just survivors. They were protectors. And now, humanity had a new role, to fight alongside the galaxy's most vulnerable, no matter the cost.